Hi everybody, I'm conscious of the fact that we didn't get a chance to meet up in May and thought it might be helpful if I was to prepare this screencast for you, giving you an overview of the research that I'm going to be asking you to do this year, that I'm going to be supervising with you this year, so that you get some sense of where we're going and what we're going to be doing, and also gives you a chance to kind of get started before then we set up a meeting to meet up in person. So, as you know, the topic is going to be teacher wellbeing, and the reason why I chose this topic is because it's very current at the moment in Ireland. We've got a lot of people talking about student wellbeing, and we've got a lot of people talking about introducing wellbeing for our students, but there is a lot of literature to suggest that wellbeing within schools is strongly related to teacher wellbeing. So it's interesting to think about, well, how is wellbeing being measured or being thought about in Irish schools, and what are the factors that affect it? But I think before we get started into teacher wellbeing, I think it's just important just to clarify the reason why we have a research topic on the PME to begin with. It was one of the conditions with the Teaching Council when the PME became a 2-year program. One of the conditions was that all teacher training courses would have an element of educational research on the program. And so the purpose of kind of doing something now in second year is to give you the experience of conducting some educational research and doing it on a relatively small scale before you become a fully qualified teacher. It also then gives you the experience of writing a short dissertation and also writing a literature review, so that if you were going on to complete another master's, or if you were going on to complete a PhD, you've had experience of writing a dissertation and you've had experience of conducting a solid literature review, which would be good stepping stones for any further education. And then it was also obviously to learn about a specific topic, so in this case teacher wellbeing. But it's important just to bear those other 2 points in mind, that it's not just about learning about teacher wellbeing, that we're really here, really what we're doing is you're learning to have an experience of conducting some educational research and to have an experience of writing up a dissertation along the same guidelines and same format of a longer taught research masters, so that if you wanted to continue your education, you would have some experience in this regard. But we are going to be looking at, specifically we're going to be looking at the research that was conducted by Tyler Renshaw, who is an American educational researcher. And he is interested in the idea of well-being, and he has written extensively on student well-being, but also on teacher well-being. You can find more information about Tyler Renshaw through the link here, or just by Googling him. And specifically, if you did Google Scholar him, you will find lots of references to different research that he has conducted and that others have referenced about him as well. But we're going to be looking very specifically at a scale he developed called the Teacher Subjective Wellbeing Questionnaire, or it's just referred to as the TSWQ for short. And this was a scale that he published in the APA, and he was interested in how could we measure, how could you begin to measure how teachers were feeling, what teachers' own well-being was, how it could be measured. So he came up with the idea that we could measure it by asking 8 questions, and they were specifically related to 2 concepts, one that he called school connectedness, so the idea of how connected people felt to their school and the culture within their school, and the second was to ask questions about how people felt about their teaching. Did they feel like they were making those connections with their students? And It has been tested in many areas, and it was shown to have very strong validity when used against other scales. So he initially conducted the research in a kind of a smaller scale in a number of different schools, middle schools and high schools in the States, and people then took his scale and they used it in different jurisdictions, they used it in different countries, and it has been shown over and over again to have a kind of a strong validity. So it's an interesting scale. I think it definitely can be used here within Ireland, and that is what we're going to use for the purpose of this research. So we're going to take this questionnaire, we're going to administer it across a number of schools, and we're going to see, does it give us any scores about teacher well-being here in Ireland. So let's just have a look at that scale now, or those questions now, and see the kind of things that are asked. So it's 8 different questions, and the way the scale works is that you use the odd numbered questions, so questions 1, 3, 5 and 7, to measure how somebody feels about school connectedness, their S or SC score. So people measure themselves along the scale from 1 to 4. So obviously then, so with 4 questions, then the highest they could get is 16. And that then the even numbered questions, so I'm a successful teacher, I'm good at helping students learn new things, I've accomplished a lot as a teacher, and I feel like my teaching is effective and helpful. These are your teaching efficacy scores, so your TE scores. And again, someone could score a maximum of 16. Someone feeling very good will score a maximum of 16. So 16 and 16 gives us 32. So a maximum of 32. So someone whose well-being is very high will be scoring closer to 32, and someone whose well-being is lower will be scoring kind of somewhere along that scale, with the lowest score being 8. So what I'm going to ask you to do for this particular piece of research is, first of all, in terms of the literature review, you're going to be looking at the research that has already been done into teacher well-being. So you're going to be asking you're going to be answering, why is it important? Why is it important that we look at teacher well-being? So the answer to that is because it's related to student well-being. Why do we know that? Well, we know it from the various different pieces of research that have already been published about that here and abroad. What are the different factors that affect teacher well-being? So have a look at kind of what are the different factors. So from studies in the UK and in particular in Australia, and from Tyler Renshaw himself, what are the factors that we know affect teacher well-being? Going to be looking at what research has been done already in Ireland around teacher well-being, and you're going to be looking at how can well-being be measured, how can teacher well-being be measured. So again, you're pulling apart again what Tyler Renshaw himself already has published on. So a lot of this is going to be based around analysing the existing published material relating to Tyler Renshaw and the TSWQ, the Teacher Subjective Wellbeing Questionnaire. So if you want to get started, that is the area to get started on. What I'm going to ask you to do, once we're through ethics, etc., what I'm going to be asking you to do is to administer that survey, administer the 8 questions in your own schools. So that can be the school you're in placement in now, or in schools where you were on placement last year. So I'm going to be asking you to try and get to 25 teachers, to try and get answers from 25 teachers. And we're also going to be looking at things like, I'm also going to ask teachers to give us, we're going to know are they male or female. We're going to look at how many students they teach on a day-to-day basis, and also look at what year groups they teach. And then we're going to gather that data, and we're going to kind of come together. I'm going to ask you to gather that data, and you're going to start comparing it then with each other and just even within yourself. So we're going to start looking at, well, if we were to look at all the answers from the male teachers, is there a difference from all the answers that we got from the female teachers? Or if we were to look at all the answers that we got from teachers who teach under 200 students, is that different from all the teachers who teach over 200 students? Again, we're going to look at what are the differences between the teachers who teach every year group to the teachers who just teach a couple of year groups. So we're going to just compare that data in itself, and we're going to see, are there any comparisons? Is there any conclusions that we can draw about why somebody's well-being might be higher or lower in a different school? So in terms of actually getting started, well, the first main thing we have to do is we have to get through an ethics submission. Now, we can't administer the questionnaire until after ethics is approved, so I need to go off now and do a bit of research myself into how we're doing ethics this year, and everyone will be doing the same because you're all administering the same questionnaire, so everyone's ethics submission will be the same, but you have to individually do an ethics form. And again, that just goes back to, you might remember, as I said on the very first slide, that really the purpose of this is to give you some experience of conducting some educational research. So you have to learn how to fill out an ethics form and learn all the the different components to it, and how to fill it out, and how to write it up, how to analyze all the different risk factors, etc. So I'm going to just go off and try and find a bit more information myself about that in terms of what form we're using this year and what are the deadlines, and then we'll arrange a physical meetup. You can only, so just to be very, very clear though, you cannot administer that questionnaire until after ethics is approved, and we are also going to work a little bit more on the questionnaire in terms of its format, in terms of the other data that we're going to gather from teachers. So please do not go ahead and do anything until after we have gone through those stages. But you can start reading about teacher wellbeing, and specifically about Tyler Renshaw. So that "and" there is important, because remember, we're not just going to be looking just solely at Tyler Renshaw. We want to look at those other factors as well. We want to look at teacher wellbeing in general and why it's important, and what are the different factors that affect it from other countries. What I would say to you is that this is all going to be done through journals. So if you don't already know how to, you need to get very familiar with using the journals online and how to search information, because all of this really is it's a newer topic, I suppose, for educational research. So there aren't specifically any books that we are going to reference within this. We're really going to be looking at the data that's been produced and been published in various different educational journals. The other place that is also, I think, going to be a good place to go and analyse will be particularly the research that's been done in Australia. Australia has a huge amount of research done about student wellbeing and teacher wellbeing and wellbeing within schools. So it's also not a bad place to start if you're looking for a starting point to go and look and see what they have done. But I hope that gets you started. I hope that answers some of your questions. Feel free to get back in touch with me specifically. And like I said, I would hope by week 2 or week 3 we'll arrange a a physical meetup. It is going to require you to stay back either on the Tuesday or the Wednesday. And again, it is important that you come to those meetings. I know that's hard. All of us are coming from quite distant areas, so I will be trying to minimize the physical meetups as much as possible. I am very happy to use Skype. I'm very happy to use Google Classroom and all kinds of other online methods as a way of collaborating to avoid the need to physically meet up. But to begin with, I think it's important that, again, we all just get together and have a look at the ethics form and have a look at the questionnaire and be able to say hello to each other and for our own well-being. And I'll look forward to seeing you around that soon. Thanks.